From the banks of Dewey Lake, it's the Dewey Pod Monster.
Speaking of always a good look, this is the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast. This is the original podcast about consumption, and we are proud members of the You Run Podcast Network. You can find all of our previous podcasts, as well as all the other great shows on the You Run Podcast Network at yourunpodcast.com. With me this week is the host of the Dewey Pod Monster Podcast, and his name is Sean. And Sean, I have a question for you to start the week, different than what we usually do.
Go ahead, brother.
I know this, but I'm going to lead into this. What is your opinion on hot sauces?
I love it. Love it, brother.
Have you had a chance to try any of the Hot Ones branded hot sauces yet? They're starting to pop up in grocery stores around us.
I'll tell you what, brother. I have not yet had a chance to try any hot sauces. I almost forgot what it was called, brother, but I remembered. Pulled it out of the abyss, brother.
For a show that bases their entire existence on trying to make people eat hot shit, I gotta say I'm pretty disappointed in the ones that I had.
No good?
They're not bad. Like, they taste good, but if you're looking for hot, not that.
Really?
Yeah, they taste good. Like the classic, I got two of them. I have one that's it's called the classic, and it's just a red label. That's like their entry one. And I got one with a yellow label. It's not the Last Stab. It's one of the other ones. But that one's got a little bit of a kick to it. And I assume like if I chugged it, it would probably build up or something. But the other one, the classic, kind of tastes like a enchilada sauce with it's somewhere between like an enchilada sauce and like a Frank's Red Hot. It is not spicy at all. I probably used about a third of the bottle on like 2 tacos tonight, and I gotta say I don't feel like I'm gonna be shitting blood or farting fire or anything like that. It definitely didn't make me sweat or any of the other things I would expect from a show called Hot Ones.
So you didn't get like a variety pack, you got a single bottle? Don't they sell like a variety pack?
I think they do on their website, but they sell them at Meijer now. I'm assuming they do at other grocery stores too. They were only like $3 a bottle, which should have been a warning, but not a bad price for, a hot sauce bottle. And yeah, I grabbed the 2 that they had. The third one was, I don't know if they don't carry it or if it just was sold out or what. But yeah, again, they're not bad tasting, but they're a far cry from what I would consider hot.
Well, that's disappointing. You kind of expect that it's going to be a hot sauce,
I mean, that's what they base their whole show on, right?
Much like our shtick. They have their shtick, and you would think it'd be a better shtick,
They would. So while Sean tells us what he's been watching over the last week or so, I'm going to pull up his Instagram account and ask him questions about No, I'm just kidding. What have you been watching this week?
I don't know where you were going with that. I'm confused. But
that's part of their shtick.
So I've watched a few things. I watched a documentary show from Vice, used to be on Vice, from 2016 to 2017. I found it on, and I'd seen some of the episodes before. It's called Balls Deep, and it follows it follows a guy, I think his name is Thomas. I want to say Thomas Morton. Could be wrong on that. But he does like these kind of like a day in the life thing. One of the episodes is about tent preachers, like revival tent preachers and stuff. And I saw one about crewing a tugboat, one about Ramadan, about bears, like not the animal bears, but the gay subculture bears. I guess it's a subculture. Alaskan natives, orgasmic meditation. And one that I thought was really interesting, it was like the last episode of the first season, was about the last week of high school in Gary, Indiana. And he follows these few seniors from this high school that are graduating. The last episode of each season seems like it's like a 2-parter, but they play the whole thing. So it's not 2 separate episodes, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. It's one of those, I found it on one of those channels, or it re-sparked my interest, one of those channels on like Plex where they have all the free streaming stuff and they just play like one show the whole time.
Yeah.
I feel like it was on one of those. On top of that, I finally got around to watching the WWE Legends on Steve Austin's last match, which I want to say it was like WrestleMania in 2022, maybe 21, 22. And I like Steve Austin. I'm not a huge fan, but I'm a fan of Steve Austin's, like as a person, I guess. And this whole episode of this WWE Legends was just like a big blowfest. They get a rib removed, suck your own dick, like just blow yourself. It was so, I don't know, just over
sticky.
Yeah, just over the top. Like it wasn't interesting. They had a whole series about The Undertaker, like The Undertaker's retiring and stuff.
Yeah.
And I ended up watching that a couple of years ago. And that was at least interesting because it was a retrospective on his full career and kind of gave you information about him that you might not know, like Mark Calloway, The Undertaker, really before he was on his retirement tour, never was out of character. Like, he wasn't interviewed as Mark Calloway. If he was ever interviewed, he'd be The Undertaker. You know what I mean? But Steve Austin, I don't know if it's just because we know so much about Steve Austin. He has his own podcast and they have a couple beers named after him. Just, he's so out there in the public that maybe that's why they couldn't really do the same kind of thing. But I just found it really uninteresting.
I feel like most of that, I know the beers for sure, but the podcast and all that, didn't that come after he was done wrestling though?
Oh, for sure. I mean, they didn't do podcasts when he was still wrestling, but I mean, I guess maybe they had started, I want to say early 2000s, 2006, maybe roughly.
I think if anyone's looking for a good retrospective on Steve Austin, the A&E biography on him, it's like the first episode they did. That one was a pretty solid, like, retrospective on his career.
Well, I mean, this is like the continuation of that. It's the same series, but yeah, the first, the original one probably was good enough. They also had one that was about,
oh, for sure,
Eddie Guerrero, which I watched, and that's pretty good. I haven't finished it because I have to watch it on like Friendly TV or whatever, that Lifetime thing. My wife gets it for all the Christmas movies, but we just ended up keeping it. I watched Eye of the Tiger, which I don't know if you're familiar with Eye of the Tiger. It's a Gary Busey movie. Does this ring any bells?
Yes, it does. And I can't think of what it is. Keep going. I'm going to look it up because it does ring several bells.
One of the Frankensteins that we did a batch, I played the trailer for it after one of the movies we played, but it's Gary Busey and Yaphet Kotto. Basically, like, it's in the dirt bike and dickhead subgenre where a bunch of drug running bikers, they kill Gary Busey's wife and they beat up his daughter, like, who's 4. Yeah, you know, as you do. He's got an appetite for vengeance, so it's got this, I don't know, it's like a lot of laughable special effects. There's one where there's like, I think the highest budget special effect that they do, he stretches a wire across 2 light poles and these bikers come through and one of them gets decapitated, and it's clearly one of those like old Halloween costume tricks where the shoulders just sit above the head.
Right.
So the arms are like really long, you know, and the head falls off, and it's hilarious. It's special effects were not a strong point of the movie. And wrapping it up, lastly but not leastly, I ended up watching Napoleon Dynamite with my kids. My older daughter hadn't seen it. The younger one had seen it, but she saw it when she was really young and was not impressed. The older one was like, this is really weird. What are we watching? But laughed the whole time. So I consider that a moral victory.
Do you like that movie?
It's okay. I think it's kind of worn out its welcome just because it was so quoted and everything. Like, it was kind of like Ghostbusters or like one of those movies where it was so culturally relevant for a year.
I hated it for that reason.
Yeah.
Like, when I saw it, it was at like the peak of, you know, exploding its dynamite all over. And when I watched it, I know I waited to watch it at home because that was back when movies were still in theaters and, you know, for more than
2 weeks.
4 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw it probably, I don't know, 6 months or so after it came out, something like that. And I remember watching, I'm like, I don't, what's the joke? I'm missing something here. So it never hit for me. I mean, I'm glad other people like it. I'm not going to shit all over it, but that was one that the hype around it, the hype train totally deflated my engine before I even got halfway through it. So
I think the first time I watched it was probably right at the height. Like, I didn't see it in the theater. I'm pretty sure I saw it on DVD I wouldn't think VHS even, but DVD after it had maybe after it had subsided initially from the theater. I always thought it was kind of funny. This time I kind of watched it and I'm like, it's like a movie we watch where it's just these loose vignettes that are tied together by stupid shit that happens, I guess.
Lost a shoestring.
Yeah. So it was, she thought it was funny. I asked her today, I said, hey, did you tell any of your friends about a real super cool movie you watched this weekend? She's like, what movie did I watch this weekend? It's like, oh, I can tell it left a lasting impression. So I'm doing my job here.
It's a fair response.
I wanted to mention one other thing.
Okay.
I haven't, and I never will, but in case you're listening and you're interested, the Killer Clowns from Outer Space game is available on Steam. It should have been out for a few weeks by the time this episode comes out, but I think we had talked about it a while ago. So there's a PC game, maybe a console. I know it's definitely PC game based on the Killer Clowns franchise.
I read a rumor, or I don't know if it's a rumor or what, but I read that they were talking about rebooting that movie. And obviously, for anyone who's listened to that episode specifically, I like that movie quite a bit more than you do. But like, I don't know why you would want to try to reboot that.
I think that was like a James Wan thing, wasn't it? Wasn't James Wan like
No, he's talking
attached,
about well, maybe. I wouldn't be surprised, but they were talking about him for Chopping Mall, which I also don't want to see remade, but I feel like that might be a little bit better than Killer Clowns. That movie is just such like pure 80s B-movie trash that trying to modernize that, like I feel like it would just come off very... I'm saying this because I can't think of anyone else who would like capture that kind of color palette, but it'd be very like just Rob Zombie garbage modernized. It would just be so over the top and so, I don't know, like there's something about movies like Killer Clowns or like Chopping Mall for that matter, that those 80s like B masterpieces that we, talk about quite often on this show. You can't recapture that feeling, like that vibe that you get from like 1980s horror movie aisle schlock, for lack of better wording. And when they do try to reboot these movies, at least for me, and if you like any of these movies, by all means, like please keep liking them and keep watching them. I'm not trying to like shit on your opinion, but for me, like taking them and just modernizing them and just like cranking everything up to 11, be it the gore, the new metal soundtrack, the strobe lights or whatever the fuck they're going to do with it. It just takes the whole like mood of that kind of movie and puts it into something that just, it's not as fun.
Yeah, it's one of those movies I feel like you can't, not that you can't, but you probably should just leave it alone.
Yeah, well,
I mean, I'm not a big fan of the movie. I think that's probably pretty clear,
sure.
But I feel like it's just a movie that should stand on its own. And there are certain movies I feel like that shouldn't be redone. I feel just like Killer Clowns is one of those. You're never going to be able to recapture the same feeling.
Right.
Maybe, I mean, again, I'm not like a huge fan of sequels either, but I think I'd prefer to see a sequel than have them like reboot it and do a remake or something.
I mean, I can kind of agree with that. The only thing with that is the only thing I might hate more than an unnecessary remake, and I don't want to, in fairness, most remakes that, when I say unnecessary remake, I mean a movie that I'm not interested in seeing remade. Like I'm all for people remake whatever the fuck you want. Like it's part of the industry. We all have them that we like. We all have those that we don't. But the only thing that I think is more annoying than the trend of remaking movies that I don't necessarily want to see a remake of is this new-ish trend of sequelizing movies that came out like 20, 30 years ago, or in Killer Clowns' case, probably closer to 40 years ago at this point. Like, it almost feels like once you get to double digits in anniversaries from the first movie, maybe you should just not make a sequel.
Yeah.
Unless you're Friday the 13th, in which case you need more sequels. But
need more time to let it breathe,
Yeah, it's just, again, this is kind of redundant because many of the sequels I like were not made by the original crew and director and all that type of stuff. But I mean, is anyone even still alive that worked on the original movie? I know there are people that are still alive from that movie, but it feels moot to me. Like, why bother?
Yeah.
We've dabbled in Wrestler's Corner. We've dabbled in Clown Corner. Do you give a shit about what I watched, or you want to hear just roll right on?
What makes you think? I mean, that's not fair. I always am interested in what you've been watching. Please tell us.
Well, you've heard some of these.
Have I?
You've heard some of these. I found a playlist on YouTube which claims it had every VH1 Behind the Music episode on it. I don't know that it had all of them because I feel like there were some bands that I remember watching Behind the Music of that I couldn't find on this list, but there was about 100 and some odd like episodes in here. So I went into a full 2-day rabbit hole of just binging different like Behind the Music episodes. And I got to say, I wonder knowing what we know now about some of these artists and some of these bands because of this magical thing called the internet. I wonder if some of the things they skip over were choices to skip over because they didn't know about it, or they were trying to like give a better impression of a guy like Lemmy. Like they skip over a lot of his alcoholism and a lot of his, other shit that might be considered less than savory. And it's like, did you just not know, or were you trying to like make him more presentable? I don't know.
Isn't that kind of weird though? Isn't that kind of part of his image that he's this?
Oh, for Lemmy, for sure.
Yeah, him specifically. Like I can't comment on anyone else.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's not part of his image being on VH1.
Yeah, true.
So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. It's kind of funny because it is. I'm sure there's been like cartoons that have mocked it at this point. I'm sure Family Guy's done it, but it's always the same thing. Like the band was going great, and they went double and triple platinum and won a Grammy, and then they started doing drugs or something like they did drugs well before that. They got better drugs or more drugs or free drugs. Like I don't know what
Access
the
to
fuck
better
you're
drugs,
talking about.
probably, right?
Right.
More potent drugs.
Yeah. So some of them are pretty entertaining. Some of them aren't. The Green Day one, it is kind of funny because I still have, I'm not going to call myself like a big fan of the band Green Day, but I don't dislike them. They have a few tracks I like, and I like a few albums as a whole. They have a lot of stuff I don't like, but listening to really all three of them just bitch about how they got turned on by the punk scene because they became popular. I'm like, yeah, well, you should have known that was going to happen. That's what they did back then. So I don't know. Bunch of little fucking whiny brats and shit. So
yeah, it's kind of, I think it'd be interesting. I should probably go back and watch some. I think it's interesting because those are all like late 90s, right? So they're about 25 years old, all of them at this point. So it's so far out of date.
Yeah, and there's a lot of them. Like there's a one on No Doubt, and like Gwen Stefani's got a solo album coming out later this year. I'm like, that was like fucking 3 decades ago.
Yeah, it's like at this point, she's probably more well known for her solo career than she was for No Doubt.
She might be more well known for being on, was it The Voice?
Yeah, The Voice. Yeah.
America's Got, whichever one it is that she's on. One of those. That's probably what she's most well known for at this point. I don't know. Kind of piggybacking on that, I also found a bunch of True Hollywood stories on YouTube. It started suggesting them once I got bored with Behind the Music. And I don't think I found a playlist for that, but it's pretty much the same thing. It's like, oh, Robert Downey Jr. was a great actor, and then he found drugs and all this stuff. And, again, same type of vibe. It's just like mid-90s trash, like basic cable television being crammed into like a 44-minute time slot to pad out advertising. I don't remember a lot of those off the top of my head that I watched, but I wrote it down, so I must have watched several because, like I said, I'm sure one YouTube addiction just ran right into the other. Apparently, I got tired of that and switched over to Netflix because I watched some cooking reality show called 5-Star Chef, which was frankly not very interesting. Basically, it's just they take like 10 chefs and they're all competing to win a job at this 5-star hotel. I'm like, they're a little less catty than what you would expect, and they cram it into 6 episodes, so they weed people out real fucking quick, like in the first 2 episodes, and then by the time we get to the last like 4, they've weed people out so quick that the people that are left, like you can tell they're kind of in over their heads. For the most, even the guy who won, it's like, I don't know that this guy's really capable of doing this, because you've critiqued, like, if you're gonna, the way they're selling this restaurant is, or this hotel, they're basically saying like, if you fuck anything up, you're fired and you're never coming back. And they're doing shit like they're forgetting to give people their entrees, they're like sending out fucking fish with bones in it and uncooked stuff, and they're just like, this is not acceptable, but you still won. I'm like, how the fuck does that work?
Does anybody get called a donkey?
I don't believe so, but I'm gonna go ahead and say sure.
They deserve it. They deserve to be called donkeys. I have a side thing that I watched on Netflix, but kind of along the same lines, but I'll save it for next time.
So I only got 2 other things I really went into. I did enjoy, there's a new, it's not a miniseries, which made me happy. It's just a short documentary film called How to Rob a Bank, which is it's about this guy named Hollywood, or that's what the media named him, who was robbing banks in Seattle. There's also some dong in it because apparently he'd like to be nude in his treehouse, and they show enough of that. I'm like, oh, well, that's not what I expected in this bank robbing documentary.
Shouldn't he be called like Space Needle or something?
No, they called him Hollywood because they called him Hollywood because he used
like special
he watched
effects.
the movie Point Break.
Oh, okay.
He watched movie Point Break and liked the idea of the mask, and then realized the mask looked really stupid in real life. So he started using like Hollywood prosthetics or Hollywood style prosthetics on his face, and wore a dare hat and robbed people like that. I like that he wore a dare hat. I thought that was kind of funny. I think I've said this before, whether it's on the show or off mic or what, but I feel like with Netflix documentaries, they're either really good or they're really kind of bland and boring. And this one will kind of skewed more on the really good side. If you have any interest in watching how cops catch a bank robber that I forgot even existed, or maybe it just kind of didn't really go into my my world at the time, because this was like in the 90s when this was happening. They ended up gunning him down or catching him well, spoilers on a holiday. I won't say which one, but it's a pretty interesting story. And it's pretty cool because there were three main guys that were like the main bank robbers. One of them is no longer around, but the other two are still alive and they're out of jail now. So they go into pretty great detail about how they figured out timing, how they figured out how to control the people that were inside the bank, how they control the tellers, all that type of shit. So I'm sure if you're looking at it as an actual instructional guide on how to rob a bank in 2024, it's probably pretty uninformative because
That
it's
sounds pretty
talking about robberies
irresponsible on Netflix's part if it was all stuff you could do now.
Yeah, but it's kind of interesting to see I don't want to go as far to call it genius, but the ingenuity of these, three aspiring criminals. And the only other thing I watched was a movie that's definitely going to get its own episode at some point, but I rewatched Demolition Man because I'm just not happy unless I watch Sylvester Stallone eat a rat burger at least once or twice a year.
Hey, this is the best burger I ever ate.
It's pretty good rat burger.
Is this Wagyu beef or what? Rat? Oh, love it too.
So I definitely recommend watching How to Rob a Bank and falling into a dark hole of behind the music and true Hollywood stories of just watching half-ass, like G-rated, like this guy did drugs.
No one ever does drugs. What are you talking about?
No, especially when they have money and, get out of jail free card, basically.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all I got. You want to switch gears and take a quick break and come back and talk about the ultimate weapon?
Let's switch gears, take a break, and talk about the perfect weapon.
All right. So we're going to talk about the ultimate warrior when we come back.
John, I want to know more about cryptids.
Do you, Sean? Well, then I have the podcast for you. Have you heard of the Ghoulish Gallery?
I haven't.
The Ghoulish Gallery is a podcast that features stories of urban legends, cryptids, monsters, and all kinds of creepy stuff from all over the U.S. and beyond. You get the chance to listen to a wonderful host chat with people about their local spooks and share knowledge with everyone.
Spooktacular.
Sounds like a pretty cool option. And when you're not listening to the Ghoulish Gallery, there's also a really awesome website that pairs with it perfectly called The Sinister Scoop, where you can read about all things spooky, be it horror movies, books, social media stuff, pretty much anything involving the horror indie scene.
Sounds scary.
We like scary, and you can check out the scary stuff at yourunpodcast.com. We are back, and as mentioned, we are talking about the Ultimate Warrior this week, or the Ultimate Weapon, maybe a perfect weapon. We're talking about a movie that's starring Hulk Hogan, which the very short overview of this movie is that we picked this movie because it's rated R and we wanted to see Hulk Hogan in his prime killing people. That's what we went for. But as per usual, we start with a third-party review, and I'm going to rattle off a few of them because they all kind of are short and work really well together. We're going to start with Jeremy, who gives this 1.5 stars out of 5. And he says, Terry is supporting one hell of a wig. And that's not even the most distracting hair in this fucking movie. Going down to KO Spines, he says, Hulk should have known better than to trust the guy with a braided ponytail. 3 out of 5 stars. And then we're going to go down to Nessie, who says, this movie single-handedly made me hate Hulk Hogan on another depth of hell more than I already hated him. And then last, because I just noticed this one, I can't ignore this. From Dan, gives this movie 1 out of 5 stars, and he says, Hogan watched his estranged daughter do an entire striptease.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, he did.
Now that this movie's been reviewed like several times, why don't you tell us what this movie's about, Sean?
All right. So if we head over to IMDb, we take a look at the storyline and the plot. Before that, I'm going to let you know this has a 3.5 out of 10 out of 971 ratings. It is not ranked anywhere. I don't think anybody's watched this movie in a while, except for us, because we're stupid, obviously. And it says the storyline and the plot, they're both the same in this movie. So I'm not going to read both. I'm going to tell you what it says. It says, when mercenary hardball Cutter discovers that the team he is working with is actually a group of IRA gun runners, he decides to put a stop to their plans. Furious with Cutter, the gun runners target him, his partner, and his family.
I just realized this movie is 1 hour and 50 minutes long, and I didn't really note. I felt like when I was watching, I'm like, this movie feels really long, but I guess I didn't look at the actual runtime of the movie, and I'm suddenly realizing why. I'm like, this is why I feel like I missed like parts of this, because I probably spaced out. Like the plot is so gripping that it was had me in a suplex or some shit, and that doesn't make
A
sense. at all.
headlock, a chokehold, a half Nelson. Yeah, this movie is entirely too long, an hour and 50 minutes.
Yeah, to say the least. But aside from Hulk Hogan, who we've mentioned already, who else is in this movie? I mean, there's only one other person that I recognized in this movie.
I don't know if my eyes can like roll back far enough in my head. This movie, number one, has the stupidest fucking nicknames of all time. Cutter, Hardball Cutter. That's Hulk Hogan's name. His handle, his G.I. Joe handle is Hardball. And we have Cobra, who is his partner, that was my dad's nickname. So we're going to call me Cobra too. I'm going to be honest with you. Like most of the people
I just know there's a guy named Danzig in this movie. I don't know how I missed that.
Yeah, he's the bouncer in the strip club.
How the fuck did I miss that?
There are people that you have not seen in anything else. I think there's Daniel Pylon. I don't know if Pylon is he plays McBride. He's like the main bad guy. He was in like some shit. Like he was in some stuff that he was in the Left Behind movie with Kirk Cameron. So that's probably what he did. He was in Ryan's Hope in 110 episodes. He was in Shoot 'Em Up. I don't know what that is. Ryan's Hope was I believe a soap opera. We have Michael D'Amico. He was in The Ultimate Weapon. I mean, there's like a bunch of people that you've not seen.
In The Ultimate Weapon, or do you mean the Perfect Weapon or the Ultimate
No, The Ultimate Weapon. See, the thing with this movie too is we did The Perfect Weapon, which was the Jeff Speakman movie. We talked about it. I don't know.
Far better movie.
Yes, it is actually. We talked about it a couple of years ago, which seems ridiculous that we've been talking about these movies for more than a year. But okay, so last guy I'm going to mention cast-wise,
we're just getting started,
is Carl Marat, who plays Cobra, the Cobra guy. He's not like G.I. Joe Cobra, but he's Cutter's partner, and he was actually in My Bloody Valentine, and Land of the Dead. So he's been in a few things, but he did play stunts in some of those things. This is one of those movies where it's like a perfect cast for stuntmen who they want to try their hand at like speaking lines in a movie, speaking roles. Because it's like the dialogue is horseshit and hey, why not? You know, just you won't seem too out of place. Hulk Hogan in this movie. So I don't even know where to fucking start with this movie because it's just mind-blowingly mind-numbing.
You skipped over Ed Leslie in this movie.
Okay, sorry. Brutus the Barber Beefcake's in this movie. As a personal favor to Hulk Hogan, I'm sure.
Oh, I'm sure. Okay, well, I'll start with, because I only wrote down a few things because this movie's so, gripping. The one thing that I really noticed with this, and I don't know who directed this, I could look at it on the screen that I'm looking at right now, but this movie to me really felt like it was supposed to be an episodic television show that somehow got, rickrolled into a fucking movie, and they threw in a little bit more violence and a boob or two, like occasionally, to give it an R rating, because the way that this movie is shot is extremely questionable. But there's so many like super close up shots on not just Hulk, which does him no fucking favors, but there's a lot of really close up shots on Hulk Hogan where they're just staring at his face and his stupid face is just looking back like you're waiting for the camera to pan off. They do it to other people too, but it also cuts from scene to scene really weirdly in that
yes,
we'll be in the jungle, like, blowing up shit from a helicopter or something, and then there might as well be like a Pepsi commercial, and then we go into like this random like nightclub or something, like out of fucking nowhere. So when I was watching, this is one of the things I went back to several times in my head while I was watching it. So I feel like I'm watching a TV show where they just took all the credits out from the end of every episode and cut all the commercial breaks out and stitched it together and called it a movie.
I just want to mention, you said about the editing. I wrote a note, and reading it back, it just said the editing.
I think I broke Sean.
The editing when Hogan is shooting the grenade launcher at a dude is bad. It's like one of those things where the explosion, they cut the the editing is like they got to cut it 500 times, and it's like giving you, it feels like you're gonna have a seizure the way that it's like cutting back and forth between, and it does.
Are you talking about when he's doing it from the helicopter?
Yes,
where he's standing like with his head in the helicopter blade, and the helicopter's, it doesn't appear that he's connected to said helicopter. It looks like he's standing on is that a leg? I don't know what you call the bottom part of a helicopter
or whatever. Yeah, the landing skid.
It looks like he's just standing there, and I have to assume that somewhere out of the shot, and I'm amazed that they took it out of the shot because they couldn't bother to do that with the stunt doubles.
The stunt doubles are so bad. They look nothing.
Yeah.
Whoever it is, if it's one or multiple people, sorry to interrupt you, they look awful. They don't look anything like him. The hair is different. It's like,
Oh, we're gonna come back to that
Okay,
because there's
great.
a roundhouse kick, which is up there with the
Seagal.
fucking broomstick. I was thinking of the broomstick in Action Jackson.
Yeah.
But when he's on this helicopter, he's literally like just the way it's shot, or when you see him, and I don't think this is green screen because this would have predated at least this movie's option to do green screen, whatever. He's just standing there like looking unattached, like, dude, you're gonna fall. Like you're gonna fall into your own explosion, but you continue to fire like rocket after rocket at like 3 dudes.
I never thought I would hear such concern from you for Hulk Hogan. Dude, be careful. You're going to fall.
I don't care about that. I would have preferred that he fell. It might have been more entertaining.
Can we just like hit on just if you have any inkling to watch this movie before we really start to get into it, you can watch us on Roku with ads, Tubi with ads, Crackle. It's on Plex if you have a Plex.
Yeah, it's pretty
account.
available.
Yeah, Freebie. It's all over the place. And I think the thing that intrigued, just to kind of jump in and give some of the logic or some of the reasoning behind why we decided that we wanted to talk about this, we hadn't seen it, but it came out in 1998. This was one of those movies where Hulk Hogan, up until this point, had been in a lot of these kind of family fare movies. He had done, Suburban Commando and just all that stupid shit like No Holds Barred, which is actually, a fun movie. And this movie came off the heels of him doing Santa with Muscles, which is like, I think, one of my favorite ridiculous Christmas movies because it's just so fucking stupid. But this movie kind of came out of Hogan wanting to ditch that family-friendly whatever aura around him, and he wanted to be a little bit more of an edgy career. I mean, this is like Hollywood Hulk Hogan and NWO and all that stuff in WCW wrestling. But this movie was supposed to be initially the guy that directed or wrote this movie, John Strong, was supposed to have Hogan and Gary Busey and Roddy Piper in a movie called The Overlords. And they sold the rights or a script to it, and it ended up not happening. It didn't work out. So Santa with Muscles finished up, and that Thunder in Paradise or Assault on Devil's Island, the TV show that Hulk Hogan was in when he drives the boat around all over the place. John Strong was involved in that too. So they were like, well, hey, let's just do this movie. So this was all filmed in Canada. And I think it kind of hits on that same thing I talked about with Hmmm, the Caitlin Cronenberg movie, where when you film a movie in Canada, in order to get certain tax credits or write-offs or whatever, you have to have like a certain amount of the cast and crew be Canadian as well. So that probably explains why we don't know a lot of who these actors are. But I mean, yeah, Hulk Hogan trying to do this gritty, I don't know if it's supposed to be dark. I don't know if it's supposed to be like ridiculously stupid to the point that it's laughable, or like what the deal is.
You know what the other thing this reminded me of a lot, but not so I very much, aside from the soap opera vibe that I already mentioned, I also got the impression on this, and this has a lot to do with the lighting in this, how Hulk looks, how not necessarily the plot, but kind of this quote story. I felt like someone watched Commando and said we could remake that with Hulk Hogan in it, because it has a lot of similar characteristics to it, except
Commando's good.
Well, yeah, that's kind of the underlying thing. And there's much better acting in Commando. Like even with Arnold, who I don't think Arnold had quite hit his stride at that point, but the acting in this from there's no good actor, and like no one gives a good performance in this movie. I can't think of a single person who I'm like, okay, that was acting, 101. None of that. But there's a lot of like scenes where it's like they found a rock whirl and just gave, all right, give the big guy the big gun and let him go blow some shit up or whatever. And at the core of it, there's a lot of scenes like that in Commando where it kind of feels like, okay, he's got the, cargo pants, he's got a ripped up shirt, no shirt, or like a vest on, and he's just going and finding the next big strong man, pick up big thing, hurt bad guy, like type scenes.
Let's just kind of break down the actual story just a little bit. So Hulk Hogan plays Hardball, and he is a mercenary essentially, and
Dickhead Cutter.
they set him up, and he's like really apprehensive about taking this guy on. It's Cobra, the son of his previous partner, and he's like, "Oh, you can't, I don't think you're really ready for this." So they have this thing where Hardball says, "Okay, if you can beat me on this training shooting obstacle course thing out in the woods, I'll let you, be my partner or whatever." And they go through, and they have live ammunition, they have pistols, and they're shooting at targets as they're running through the woods, like pushing each other over to get in front of each other to shoot at stuff. It's like, you're going to shoot this fucking idiot. So essentially what happens is Cobra gets there, his eventual partner gets there. He gets a call. They're doing some raid on like a gun running operation. And the guys that hired him and his partner, Cutter and his Hardball and his partner, is the one that's actually, he's in the IRA. He's like, he's stealing guns from the US government. And Cutter,
It's the most Latin-looking Irish guy I've ever seen, by the way.
Hulk Hogan, I can't even keep his stupid name straight. Hulk Hogan is basically like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. So they blow up all the weapons, and they think there's not going to be any repercussions. And well, the repercussions are, you blew up all our shit, you fucking asshole, and we paid you to do this job, and you did it. And you killed all these people, these innocent Americans that were guarding this, and now you made your bed, you got to lie in it. But Hogan's like, no, I'm not going to do that. So then they start going after him, his estranged daughter, who's a stripper. At the beginning of the movie, there's a scene where he's carrying this kid, and the kid ends up being his daughter, which you should have probably known, that was going to happen. But it's just this nonsensical, incredibly lame and cheap looking movie starring Hulk Hogan, who's trying to, I don't know, dirty up his image or something. And it doesn't work. It's just so lame. And the whole thing is just like, it's boring and sleepy and it's just not good. It's bad.
I don't know. When the movie tries to be an action movie, I think it has some redeeming qualities. Like, you do get to see a fair amount of carnage and chaos and whatnot. You do see some kind of, it's not good in the sense that like, oh, I'm really on the edge of my seat watching this action movie, but it's kind of entertaining in the sense like, look at this bullshit, like that kind of movie. Because every action sequence, every like bit of anything that happens in this movie is really accompanied with like, look at this action sequence that looked really fucking dumb. Is almost like 100% the following line when you say, look at this ... it was really fucking dumb, comes up a lot.
Do you say, look at this?
Here's a nice piece of shit.
You do, at least in retrospect. But there's, like I said, the fact that you're seeing this guy, eventually he trades in his cargo pants for khakis, which I thought was really funny, because you see him like running around in pleated Dockers for half of this movie without a shirt, because, got to lose that at some point. There's certain things, like I mentioned, this roundhouse kick that Hulk Hogan does, which rivals the roundhouse kick from Coach in Action Jackson. It's like, he's at like this bar or some titty bar or some shit, and he's roughing up Brutus the Barber Beefcake, and of course all these other goons come in and they gotta wrestle around and shit, and they do this like faraway cut where all of a sudden whoever's doing these roundhouse kicks, one, I don't think it's their real leg because it looks very shitty, but two, the guy's like maybe 180 pounds, maybe. He's tall, he's skinny, and he's got like a weird ponytail, which Hulk doesn't have a ponytail in this movie. He's got a weird toupee on that's like glued to his head all bizarrely. And then it just cuts back to Hulk Hogan like, yeah, I just kicked that guy in the fucking face. Like, dude,
what?
No, you didn't.
Wait.
So
the thing about the stunt doubles that I think is just hilarious is Hulk Hogan has that skullet, that's his walking around haircut. And in this movie, he's got...
Except in this movie.
That's right. In this movie, he's just got a full head of hair, this blonde wig that's like kind of a brush cut, but kind of like combed backwards, slick back, I guess, so to speak. And whenever they show the stunt doubles, they'll be running off in the distance where like squibs or something are going off, like the gunfire, simulated gunfire. And they have the hair like he would normally have. It's like they didn't tell the stunt guys that, oh yeah, Hulk's wearing a wig in this, so you should probably wear one too. They were like, they shaved the horseshoe haircut and shit ready for Hulk Hogan to show up on set. And Hulk must have shown up in a wig, and they're like, fuck, now what? Now what are we going to do? I guess we're just going to run around and look like assholes.
How great would it be if they cut off the ponytail and just taped it to the top of their head?
I mean, maybe that's what they did.
Close enough. Yeah, I did. The only other thing that I wrote down on this, because for a nearly 2-hour movie. There's really not a lot that happened. In fact, I spent a good chunk of time after I watched it like, what the fuck happened in this movie? Which is not the best sign.
Yeah, generally not a sign of a good movie.
How'd you like the landmine scene?
Oh, the bouncing Betty shit?
The landmine scene at the end in the barn with the car. So I don't think Sean's remembering this. The short version is there's a landmine inside of this barn, and it starts by, I think Hulk's daughter like triggers it, and he
like disarms it.
and then this other bad guy steps on it, some random fucking goon, and Hulk's like haha, and walks out, and this fucking cop car is like speeding up to go like fuck him up or something, and Hulk doesn't shoot the guy in the car. I'm gonna keep calling him Hulk because I don't care what his name is in the movie.
Hardball. Stupid.
He shoots the car randomly, and the car like goes airborne, then like lands on 2 wheels, skids like into this barn, forcing the dude on the landmine off the landmine, which causes the landmine to explode and like disintegrate this barn. This barn is like, I don't know how big a landmine explosion is. I really don't care to find out, but I don't know if it's in the middle of a barn where if it's going to totally decimate it the way this does. Maybe it would. But it's pretty entertaining and funny, and how stupid this is.
There's this whole subplot where his daughter she's a stripper, and the bad guy wants to, like, these other strippers are getting paid top dollar to supposedly quote unquote have dinner with like these rich guys or whatever, like escorts, and she gets hired out to do this, and she ends up going to the bad guy who's rich. He's like bankrolling the gun runners. She goes to his house, and she finds this, like, after he attempts to rape her, she finds this necklace that is like a thumb drive, and Hulk's wife or girlfriend, fiance, whatever, I don't know, they don't really ever say that what she does, but she's like this part-time hacker, and
she exists.
Yeah, there's this great scene where she's like got the thumb drive inserted, and she's like trying to crack the code, and the file that shows up, or the graphic, it says C:\secret_file.doc, and she's trying to like put the password in, she can't figure it out, and Hogan's like, well, we got to get this thumb drive back, can you copy it to your desktop, brother? And she's like, yeah, I can do that. And this whole thing is just so stupid. Like, it's just, there's another scene which I thought was kind of hilarious, is like when Hulk is trying to infiltrate the bad guy's lair at the end of the movie, which feels like it takes forever. It's like, this is an hour and 50-minute movie, and this scene of him trying to break into this guy's secret lair, well, not secret lair, his lair, is like half an hour, the last half hour of the movie, and he's like scaling this brick wall like he's a ninja or something. Dude, you're like 6'7", and you weigh 300 pounds. Yeah. Do you think no one is going to see you climbing up the side of this building, and no one's going to hear you like scrabbling around trying to get up this thing? It's just,
I do like when he finally confronts the bad guy, and he goes, you tried to rape my daughter. And the bad guy goes, yeah, well, I just wanted to get you here. I'm like, oh, well, that justifies it.
Oh, no problem.
Right. I don't know. The whole movie's a fucking footnote. So I don't have a whole lot else to say. I mean, I think it's pretty clear how we are leaning on this one. Do we need to break this down like
no
ad nauseum?
God, no. I don't think I can deal. I don't think I can handle it. I don't think I can handle it.
Then you're in for a big treat, bro, because it's hot dog time.
Who's going first on this one, Matt?
I just want to say, I feel like we haven't really talked a whole lot about the movie besides kind of bagging on it, but
there's not a whole lot to talk about.
For an hour and a half, 50-minute, I was going to say hour and a half, I wish. An hour and 50-minute movie, there is surprisingly very little that happens. There aren't many movies that I watch for this show that I'm just super bored out of my mind. But with that being said, this movie for me should be called Watch Check the Movie. I'm really surprised that you said you didn't check to see what time it was, because I looked, it felt like it's one of those things where you're in, like when you're a kid and you're going for a car ride and you're like, all right, cool, we must have been going for at least an hour, and you look at your watch or whatever, you look at the clock in the car and it's been like a minute. This movie, it's so milquetoast. The characters are uninteresting. The story is really straightforward. There's not really any twists or turns. It feels like all the sharp edges that Hogan wanted this movie to have, like all this grittiness that it wanted to have, is just totally filed down, so no one really gets their feelings hurt, or like there's no real edginess to it. This was supposed to be Hulk Hogan's foray into these gritty, darker films, but it feels like a PG action action movie where they threw a scene basically dead nuts right in the middle of it with some boobs to like get your, stoke your fire and be like, oh man, this is going to be great. There's boobs and Hulk Hogan is in a scene with boobs. Okay. Like the guy, he has kids. It's not like he's never seen boobs before. This movie to me feels like you're watching like one of those USA Up All Night movies where they just had to cut everything good. And what you're left with is not even fun enough to be like a third-rate action flick. It's like a 100th rate action flick. It's like double Z grade, just junk. To me, I don't know. I think The Ultimate Weapon is the ultimate letdown. I was hoping to have like some cool shit that Hulk would do in this his first R-rated thing. And I guess I did remember the landmine scene in the car because I wrote, and it's that's how quickly I forgot. I wrote my little like rating, 2.5 exploding cars in barns out of 11 hot dogs. So I totally know what you're talking about, but I just wiped it from my memory. It was that forgettable.
Well, that's fair. I mean, I'm not that far off from you. Again, at the end of the day, this is a bad movie, and it's not so bad that it's good. It's just kind of bad. The acting's bad. The editing is fucking worse. The story is barely there. And I think part of why we're not really breaking down the story more is because I don't remember the majority of it. Like I said, I watched this. It's Monday now. I think I watched this last Thursday, so 4 days ago. And earlier today, I was not quite having a panic attack because it's not a movie worth panicking about. But I was like, I don't fucking remember the majority of what happened in this movie. So I almost had to like look up clip notes, be like, oh yeah, okay, I remember things. So it's not memorable, but for what it is, I mean, there is moment, if you can laugh at something being bad, and it's not so bad that it's good, you're just laughing because it's so bad that it's bad. It's got a couple moments of, moderately entertaining action sequences because of how shitty they are, not because of how good they are. It's definitely a one and done, though. There's absolutely no reason to revisit this piece of shit. It's kind of just 3 Hulk Hogan wigs out of 10 hot dogs for me. Like, I'm not totally pissed that I watched it, but I have zero desire to ever look at this thing again.
And I'm really disappointed now because I see that there's the VHS version of it is 95 minutes as opposed to 110 minutes, which is like the version that we watched.
Would we get the director's cut or some bullshit?
It says that the US version of the film, it lists a running time of 110 minutes, but the Canadian version from Alliance Atlas Video clocks it at 95 minutes. Fuck.
We got the wrong one.
Yeah, no shit. And this, I don't know which one. I watched the one that was on Tubi. There are movies that are just like you said, it's so bad it's good. And this is just, no, it's just bad. Like it's not, it's really bad when for the show, I write stuff that I see in scenes that I want to kind of bring up that are funny or just really stupid. And one of the third party reviewers brought it up, like the strips club scene, Hogan's watching his estranged daughter like strip on stage. And he does kind of turn away to be like, oh, this is awkward. But it's just like, what were you thinking?
Even include that though?
Yeah, why is it there?
That? Like we've seen so many movies with strip club scenes, whether it's the father or not, that go in there, and it's easy enough to have. If you insist on showing a girl stripping, have her do her little act, and then have her go backstage or something in a robe, and there's Hulk being like, "Oh, come on, daughter," whatever,
And to clarify, the daughter never doesn't get nude. She just does a dance, and then
did she?
Yeah, she does.
I don't remember.
No, I was like, believe me, I was perving. I was like, oh, cool. This chick's kind of hot. Let's see what happens. And nothing happened.
Like I said, I remember a couple boobs in that scene, but yeah. I guess I didn't care whose they were.
They're just,
I just saw
random side strippers like walking around without their tops on.
Those are the best kind of side strippers.
There was a scene that I thought was really funny, and we can move on after it because it's so fucking forgettable. But when he's looking for his daughter before she's at the strip club, there's this, I think he kind of finds like this row house or something, like a flop house, and a bunch of studios or lofts or some shit, and the doors are barely like on the hinges, and he knocks, and this guy answers the door, and he has like a flower painted on his chest, and the lady, the roommate, comes out and he's like, "Where's Mary Kate?" which is his daughter's name. "Where's Mary Kate?" She's like, "She's not here." And the lady, the girl, the female roommate says, "I'm not Mary Kate and you're not invited, so get out." You're not invited, get out. Like, what the fuck?
Again, this speaks to this movie. I don't remember that at all.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so forgettable. It's probably a good thing that all of it fell out of my head, giving it a week to kind of simmer. And I was like, shit, what are we going to talk about? Because I don't remember anything, like you said, looking for Cliff Notes kind of version to see if you can remember something can jog your memory. It's just the movie's so just bad. It's just forgettable. And I hate to keep saying forgettable and harp on it. It's very forgettable.
So, what is not forgettable is our question of the week, because our question of the week is pretty to the point. It says, what is your favorite movie featuring a wrestler who is not The Rock? Over on X, we're going to start with Horror Fixated. He says his favorite is John Wick featuring Kevin Nash. This might be my what the fuck is wrong with you moment. I haven't seen any of the John Wick movies.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's a surprise.
So,
I haven't seen 4,
Yeah.
but I've seen 1, 2, and 3.
I'm moderately surprised by it too, but such is life. Let's see. So we're going to continue on X and our friends over at Pop Culture Reflection Pod. You can also find them on the You Run Podcast Network. Said that they're going to go with the OG, of course, which is No Holds Barred with Hulk Hogan. Nah, I'm kidding. It's probably the first Guardians of the Galaxy with Batista, both of which are pretty solid answers. Our buddy VP, who is at Let's Talk Horror, said, I can't pick one, but you got They Live with Rowdy Roddy Piper, Suburban Commando with the Hulkster. I'm one of the very few people that likes Army of the Dead with Batista. And of course, Jesse Ventura appears in Predator and The Running Man. Oh shit, Ready to Rumble. So there's that too. So I totally forgot about Jesse Ventura being a wrestler. I always think of him from Predator first.
You always think of him as a governor first, right?
No, I usually just think of him as, well, what's his face from fucking Predator?
Is not having time to bleed.
Exactly.
He's in Running Man too.
I haven't watched that in a long time. I'm probably overdue to watch that one. So I know I do like that movie quite a bit.
Sounds like we got an episode coming up.
Eventually. All right. At Fiendish Fitz says They Live starring Rowdy Roddy Piper. They Live came up quite a bit on this question. Probably not surprising. At Late and Confused says some of my favorite movies featuring wrestlers are They Live with Rowdy Roddy Piper. See No Evil with Kane, says he was pretty good as a killer. And Isle of the Dead with Mary Say? I don't know who that is. He was pretty good in that. Surprised to see her go. Oh, Mary C. Must be a woman wrestler. Good for her. Surprised to see her go from on-screen to diva and a zombie killer military doctor. I have no idea what that movie is, but I'm all for an Island of Dead wrestling zombie doctors.
There are words here, and I read them.
Yeah. At Fixology 101 says Back in Action 1994 with Piper and Blanks, which he's got Piper gunning he's laying someone on fire by the crotch in this gif. So that looks fun. I haven't seen this movie. Back in Action. You seen it?
Mm-mm.
Might have to talk about that one again. So at Hey Mr. Wilson 40 says They Live with Rowdy Piper. Dave Bautista smashes everything that he's been in. John Cena, fantastic comedic timing and willing to make fun of himself. And Kevin Nash scared the shit out of me in TMNT 2. I didn't know he was in Ninja Turtles 2, but okay.
He's Shredder.
Is he?
Mm-hmm. Big
Did not
Shredder.
know that, dude. Like WWF Shredder?
Well, he's like 6'7"
Super Shredder?
or whatever he is.
Like at the end after he does the drugs and gets all
Yeah,
yoked
he's the
out.
one bashing all the shit up. Yeah.
So, friends over at Sledgehammer Horror say Knock at the Cabin. Batista ate that role, and that is doubled up on by Cinema Poison, who also says Batista and Knock at the Cabin. I didn't see that. You saw that when it came out,
Yeah.
didn't you?
I saw it. It's not bad. Yeah, it's not bad.
Okay. It's Shyamalan, right?
Yeah. Shamalama Ding Dong.
I'm not a big fan of him. But let's see. At Smokey Bees says John Cena as Fred's dad in the world famous popular movie Fred the Movie. You should watch it if you haven't already. It's a cinematic masterpiece. Don't listen to the naysayers. There are several naysayers that disagree with him in the comments. I'm not going to read all that. Our friend Scott over at You Run Podcast. Guess what? You can find him at yourunpodcast.com as well.
Really?
Says the entire Tropic Thunder series or Suburban Commando, and he has a pretty comical gif of Hulk lifting heavy shit in front of a guy in a suit. Friends over at Dissect That Film say it's tied between Rowdy Piper and They Live and Batista and Guardians of the Galaxy. First one to bring up Andre the Giant at Shoot That Flick says Princess Bride. Then Stu World Order at SWO Productions says Suicide Squad, which I'm Cena's only in the second one of those, right? He's not in the first one.
I believe the second one. Yeah.
Second one was better than the first one anyway.
Yeah.
I liked it better.
Yeah.
I would assume that's the common consensus. At Dadbod Horror 83 also says Rowdy Roddy Piper and They Live. Found on the Shelf Podcast, who's at Found on Shelf Pod, says there are some good answers here, so I'll go with a bad one. Hornswoggle and Leprechaun Origins. Friend Ren, who is at Ren XXX, also went with Andre the Giant and Princess Bride. Law Dog Stripes says Rowdy Roddy Piper and They Live. And Hazel Monsolo says tough to pick against the Princess Bride. So we're getting a lot of repeat answers. We got a couple more left. So we still have Facebook and Instagram to do.
Oh boy.
So over on Facebook, our friend John, who was OJ, says Suburban Commando. I haven't seen it since I was a kid, but I rewatched the hell out of it because it was so stupid in all the best ways. And then we're going to finish up on Instagram with @FrightFrere, who says, Knock at the Cabin. Without Batista, the movie doesn't work as well as it does. And then coming to steal my thunder again is our friend Sam from Feature Creatures DTF, who says, Rowdy Roddy Piper in Hell Comes to Frogtown, because of course. And then honorable mention to the entire bus of wrestlers that explodes in MacGruber.
I like that.
So, Sean, who do you want to throw in the pile here as far as your favorite wrestler in a film?
If I'm going to go film, I'm going to say They Live. I mean, I think that's my favorite role. That's like Rowdy Piper is the original Rock. Because when he was in They Live and the few like actual real budget movies that he made, people were raving, oh man, this guy can really act. It's like, no, yeah, I mean, these are people. They act all the time.
I think he can act. You should watch The Reconciler. He cannot fucking act.
I mean, he's not great. But if I was going to foray and just transition to TV, it's going to be John Cena and Pacemaker. Peacemaker? Peacemaker.
You can do that in a movie too. Just a character.
Suicide Squad. Yeah.
I think he's great as Peacemaker. And I also like Batista as, was it Drax or whatever in Guardians? Like and I'm not a guy who likes comic book movies or things generally, but I do like, what's his fucking name? I can't think of his name now. Director
James Gunn.
I do like James Gunn quite a bit, and I've yet to find a James Gunn movie that I wasn't at least entertained by. But I'm gonna again piggyback off of Sam on this and say that Hell Comes to Frogtown is my favorite wrestler starring movie because it's so fucking ridiculous and you get to see frogs fucked. So
Batista, just to not to change the subject, but Batista was really good in the new Blade Runner as well.
Haven't seen that yet. He's actually pretty good as an actor, period. Like, you know, BP mentioned that Army of the Dead or whatever, the Vegas one.
Yep.
And there's plenty of things you could pick that movie apart for. I don't think Batista is one of them. Like, of all the things in that movie that are questionable, he's fine in that movie, at least from what I remember on it. So did you ever see that?
Yeah, I did. I wasn't a fan.
Because of him or just in general?
No, just the movie in general. He was fine. Just the movie just didn't really do much for me.
Yeah, I thought it was way too heavy on the CG stuff. And that might have been a product of COVID, because didn't that come out in like the worst part of the pandemic or something like that?
Yeah, it definitely came out in the height of everything.
But regardless, so yeah, anything you want to tack on before we wrap up on this shit show of a movie episode?
Nothing I want to include in the show.
All right, then. Then we will be back next week. We'll talk about something that's hopefully better than The Ultimate Warrior or The Ultimate Weapon.
Or The Perfect Weapon.
Or The Perfect Weapon. Maybe we'll talk about it. Does The Ultimate Warrior have a movie we can talk about?
I hope not.
Okay. Well, we're not going to do that then. So we'll be back next week. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed this, or if you didn't enjoy this and want to hear us talk about a better movie, you can find all of our old episodes on our site, which is crap.town. You can also go to yourunpodcast.com, which is the network that we are proud members of. You find all of our previous episodes there, as well as all our fellow network members. They're all available at yourunpodcast.com. You can follow us on social media pretty much everywhere. If there's one that we're missing, just let me know and I'll make an account. But we are at Dewey Pod Monster on everything. It's a good way to be able to communicate with us and tell us what you want to hear us talk about. I have had a couple people give us some recommendations or requests for episodes, so that might be coming out at some point in the near future. Sean, what am I forgetting? What else do we need to tell people to do?
Well, if you want your question of the week answered and read on this show, leave an answer to when John posts them on social media. If you want to check out any of my craft beer, Michigan adventure stuff, you can find me at youtube.drafttherapy.com or find me on all the social media networks at Draft Therapy.
All right. I think that's all we got. We'll be back next week.
Bye.
You lose, American asshole.
For most men,
They want a clean takedown.
war is a dangerous game. But for mercenary Ben Cutter,
I'm an independent contractor for the NSC. I get suggestions, not orders.
it's just another day at the office.
The weapons in that complex were worth $20 million. I want their names.
I'm here to see my daughter.
You have absolutely no right to say a single word to me.
After tonight, your father's going to want me much more than I want him.
And the guy tries to rape me to get back at you.
Where's McBride? Out for you, boy. But it's not a good cigar.
I'm Dylan McBride.
The man that tried to rape my daughter.
Just a trick to get you here, and it worked.
I think you miscalculated.
When they made it personal, he made it professional.
There's one thing you need to learn. piss me off.
Terry Hulk Hogan is the ultimate weapon.